Hi. I'm alone! Anime isn't popular, at least in regions outside of East and Southeast Asia, and while it has been slowly becoming more and more mainstream over the past decades, it's still hard to fight off the Naruto running, bright colored hair, power-up screaming stereotype. You can't just walk into some bar to some slang for gender you are romantically interested in. Go, "Hey babe, I watch anime," and make their underpants cream. Needless to say, the only people who watch anime are losers and outcasts, and the show medium, to pander to that audience, is filled with underdog stories of how loners become successful in the world. However, as much as I can goon to the power fantasy of Solo Leveling Guy where he straight up murders someone and says, "I am the solo leveler," in reality, being alone is nowhere near as cool as anime makes it out to be. You kinda just get bullied or learn to hide your passions because nobody cares about you. While I was watching anime alone in my dark room, everyone else was making friends, going out, playing sports like American football or basketball or shogi. From March Comes In Like a Lion features the dull living habits of shogi prodigy Rei Kiriyama as he tries figuring out what the hell he's doing with his life. Despite being the 5th junior high student to become a professional shogi player, a few years later, he never actually lived up to the expectations everyone placed on him. Fell off, to be honest. Rei's having a huge slump in his career, losing too many matches and ultimately rescinding his chance at being promoted up a class this year. Hobby and sports anime tend to portray prodigies as exciting, whimsical personalities, but March Comes In Like a Lion does not do this for Rei. He lives in a single apartment room by himself with no furniture, not even curtains to cover up the blinding light of God whenever he wants to sleep. The only objects he keeps around him are a shogi board and some books to practice with, a futon to sleep on, some kitchen utensils to occasionally cook food, and wait, what's a high schooler doing living alone? You see, Rei didn't become a prodigy for no reason. As a kid, he didn't have any friends and was bullied at school. He enjoyed playing shogi against his very busy father as it was a medium that he could see his dad's true expressions. For a child, Rei was pretty good at the board game until one day when he came back from a field trip at school, his whole family, mother, father, and a little sister, were hit by a car, everyone fatally passing. Rei was the only one left in the world. No one in his related family wanted to take him in, so his father's friend, Masachika Koda, a shogi professional, adopted him. While this might seem like a hopeful new start and an infinitely better option than being in an orphanage, Rei's adoption was a major disruption to his new family. Koda, his adoptive father, only gave his attention to the child best at shogi, and since Rei was good at the board game, he received the most, greatly upsetting his step-siblings. Koda would force his children to take classes and play in tournaments, and Rei's outstanding performance in shogi severely contrasted the other two, who eventually gave up the hobby. It became clear that Rei, despite being the adopted child, was the father's favorite, putting someone else's child over his own biological children. The brother quickly got depressed, becoming addicted to video games, while the sister turned to delinquency. Witnessing the effects of his adoption, Rei dedicated himself to becoming a professional shogi player as early as possible so he could leave that house and live on his own, attempting to mitigate any further damage to the family. Even though living by yourself might seem fun with all that freedom you have, it also means no one is there to pick up your slack or motivate you. So maintaining simple habits like eating right and basic hygiene are often overlooked. Rei, while there is a scene of him in the bathtub, so it's confirmed he at least has one over on a Smash player, is terrible at taking care of himself. Throughout the times he's in that lonely, furnitureless room, he hardly eats a good meal, with most of his time being spent either sleeping or studying shogi. This routine quickly catches up to him as on a late night, he almost passes out on the side of the road. Unable to overlook someone in need, a woman takes him to her home. These are the 3 Kawamoto sisters. You have the caring and gorgeous Akari, the bright and tenacious Hinata, or Hina, and the adorable Momo. On On the outside, they live in a small rundown shack of a house with the bills being paid by their grandfather who runs a Japanese sweets shop. However, it's that genuine affection the family has for each other that directly contrasts Horei's adoptive family, filling that small living room with coziness and warmth. They might be always tight on money, but their generosity always extends to Horei, constantly inviting him to eat dinner with them. And Horei, forever indebted with their favors, will go out of his way to buy groceries for them. While they might seem like the perfect family, something is missing here. 3 sisters and a grandfather? Where are the parents? What I absolutely love about March Comes In Like a Lion is how the show portrays trauma and grief. Holidays and festivals that are supposed to be bright and happy can quickly turn melancholic and sad. While the 3 sisters do have an altar in their living room, it's oddly only for the mother and grandmother, not for the father, who also isn't seen anywhere in the household. When mourning, they always talk about their mother, and again, not the father. It's these subtle hints where you can tell that something very terrible happened that involves the death of the mom that the family still holds the dad accountable for. The 3 sisters never directly say how the mother died or what happened to the father, and this shows that the wounds they're still scarred with haven't healed. On the last day of a festival dedicated to mourning the dead, Horei is invited to eat with the family. They celebrate as usual, having a big meal and offering food to their loved ones. They light a ceremonial fire, and as the family is staring into the flames, Horei observes their solemn faces. The fire finishes burning out, and as everyone gets prepared for bed, Hina suddenly says she wants to go to the convenience store. The grandfather pushes Horei to tail her. Hina deviates from the road to the convenience store, heading to the side of the city river instead. As Horei catches up to her, the bright full moon illuminates Hina's face. She cries out to her mom. He steps next to her, telling her it's okay to stay there a little longer. Horei thinks about how when his real family tragically died, the sad memories became too painful to bear, and so he stopped thinking about them. He questions if that was really the right thing to do. I absolutely love how this chapter was directed. Everything leading up to the river and then the big reveal of Hina crying. The lack of sound during that cut is completely intentional and masterfully executed. When you expect this type of painful sob screaming, the first thing that hits you is the sound. But to completely remove that and have the viewer purely focus on Hina's face, figuring out from her expression alone that she is going through agonizing grief, still makes me tear up every time I rewatch it. Horei and Hina have the same feeling about their family members no longer with them. However, while she embraces the simultaneously happy yet heart-wrenching memories of her mother, Horei does the exact opposite, never wanting to be reminded of anything related to his deceased family, absorbing himself in shogi instead. And it's this contrast between a screaming, crying girl and a silent, non-emotive boy that really gets you to question the difference between their methods. It's generally accepted that whenever you feel intense negative emotions, you should let those feelings out through a healthy coping mechanism rather than bottling it up inside you. And I completely agree. But somehow, I relate to Horei in the sense that I'd never learned this lesson before I needed it. While distracting yourself from that pain is a tactic that makes it a lot easier to move on, at the same time, you forget precious and important memories that make you who you are. One day, Horei gets a call from Akari, the oldest sister, asking him to pick up Momo from kindergarten. Walking home, Momo skids her arm on the sidewalk, and Horei helps her tend to the wound, disinfecting it and putting a band-aid on it. As he examines her small and delicate arm, he's reminded of holding a similar one at the morgue. His dead little sister. Tears start building up in Horei's eyes, and before he knows it, he's crying in front of Momo. The early episodes of March Comes In Like a Lion are a wild ride. Horei will be doing a menial task. Wow, look, threading a needle. Then boom, completely unrelated traumatic past. And even though it might seem to come out of nowhere, to me, that random cut to a painful memory is realistic. As much as you try to not think about what you went through, your subconscious will never forget. And just like that random cut, during a mundane activity, you'll be reminded of what happened. It takes extreme amounts of courage to consciously confront traumatic incidents. And while I can yap about how doing that is the healthier way, it's also something you can't expect everyone to know, let alone accomplish. You have to be adequately emotionally and mentally prepared, which isn't a skill that's taught in school or even by the most competent parents. No one, especially in Rei's case, is prepared for trauma like that in their lives, and his way of running from his past is completely reasonable. It would take years for even the most mature people to fully recover, but Rei was a child when his life changed drastically. With little to no guidance, especially in the form of an adoptive father who doesn't care for his own biological children unless they're shogi prodigies, you can't expect Rei to know any better. However, at the same time, Rei can't expect his life to get better until he faces these tragic memories, because in order for you to be open to happiness, you also have to be open to sadness. Rei battling his past is great and all, but that doesn't really solve his more pressing issue, the shogi promotion matches. To avoid demotion, he has to not lose against his remaining opponents, one of which is an old man by the name of Matsunaga. Thin and frail, he's played the 81-tile game for more than 4 decades, but is on the verge of demotion, going down a class if he's beaten by Rei. There's a rumor going around that if he gets demoted, he'll finally retire from shogi. Before the match, Rei witnesses Matsunaga praying at a shrine, thinking aloud that he just wants to go home. Me too, man. The two battle it out, and Matsunaga's strategy is all over the place. His face is very reactive to how things are on the board, so it becomes super obvious when he makes a mistake or when he has a trick up his sleeve. Rei inevitably wins and is dragged around by Matsunaga after the match, treating the old man to some fine cuisine and alcohol. After drinking too much, Matsunaga finally confesses that he knew he couldn't win against Rei. He's played shogi for 40 years, but never held any impressive achievements. Meanwhile, Rei's existence being a child prodigy made Matsunaga jealous and frustrated. Even though he thought he accepted defeat, the old man in the middle of the match yearned to win that game. Rei asks him if he likes shogi, and Matsunaga replies that he doesn't know. He's miserable when he loses and ecstatic when he wins. There is no combination of words that describes how he feels. Yet, despite being demoted, despite playing the game for too long, despite not being all that great, Matsunaga decides not to retire. Rei's final match is against Yasui. On the outside, the man isn't of much note, but he turns into a completely different person once he loses. Describing Yasui's losing habits as destructive is quite an understatement. He drinks, gets crazy, and gambles to the point where his wife is divorcing him. With Christmas coming soon, their daughter wanted to stay with Yasui until the holiday, which is not going to happen if he loses this match. Conflicted, Rei plays against Yasui. The match goes steady until Yasui makes a mistake after the lunch break. This one mistake sunk his morale drastically, and Yasui essentially gave up mid-match with his opponent Rei trying to get him to fight again. Rei inevitably wins again, and for the post-match review, Yasui mutters he didn't see how to compensate for his mistake, concluding that there was nothing he could do about it, making his defeat certain. There's a saying in chess, it's not the first mistake that kills you, but the second. The point is that it's okay to make mistakes as long as you calm yourself down and sort them out. However, people like Yasui tick me off to the max. He faces a hardship and screws up, which is completely fine, but doesn't put in the effort to keep cool and keep going, which is infinitely more significant than beating yourself up over making that mistake in the first place. Instead of genuinely trying to improve himself and get better at the game, he uses reasoning to prove why he's inferior and why he can't change. I've mentioned here and there about how I believe emotions guide your logic, and I think Yasui's character perfectly exemplifies that. He feels defeated, using logic to prove himself right, and doesn't see everyone else around him, even old, demoted Matsunaga, trying their best to get better at the game. When making a mistake, Yasui immediately gives up, and while he would just be a regular one-off annoying opponent in another show, remember, he is divorced and ruining his daughter's Christmas because of this habit. I empathize with a lot of characters that are down on their luck or are in horrible circumstances, but I cannot empathize with Yasui because of the fact that he is surrounded by by people doing their best to try to improve themselves, yet chooses to wallow in his own misery, causing the people close to him to suffer. Yasui leaves the match room. Good riddance. And oh shoot. He left the Christmas present for his daughter behind. Rei quickly grabs a bag and chases after him, barely catching up. He hands him the bag, with Yasui claiming that it's not his. He's never seen it. Rei pushes it onto him, and Yasui, his face filled with bitterness and hostility, snatches the bag from Rei. Turning around, he returns to his meek posture and walks home. Rei, on his way to his apartment, after seeing a man in such a miserable state, starts running. He runs, and runs, and runs, and runs, until he reaches an empty lot. Pent up with rage, Rei screams out what was he supposed to do in that situation. He yells that it's Yasui's fault for being bad at the game, that he knows when his opponents don't study or practice, that sorry excuses and sad backstories shouldn't stop his opponents from improving. To him, shogi is everything, and Rei collapses on the ground from exhaustion. Everyone has something on the line when they play a match, and even though Yasui's family situation and terrible habits are depressing, Rei has an equally depressing situation, if not more, compared to Yasui. Rei had the ability of throwing the game to give Yasui the win, but that would sacrifice his own well-being for someone else's, and unlike the very unbiased and definitely not rigged slavery circus named America's Got Talent, you don't get any pity points for having the sadder backstory. Yasui had plenty of chances to make himself a better player, abstaining from alcohol when he loses, actually practicing, and even plenty of warning signs like getting divorced from his wife. Rei's outraged outcry in the middle of the empty lot is one of the very few times he's ever shown such a charged emotion throughout the entire anime, and he's completely justified to be this upset because the situation reminded him of how he imposed on his adoptive siblings in his childhood, permanently damaging the family. Yasui, while he never said anything to Rei, gave him that expression that he robbed him of that chance to spend Christmas with his daughter. The same way Rei took the affection from his adoptive father away from his step-siblings. And it's that silent interaction with that look on Yasui's face that gets the child prodigy to become agitated. Rei might be in terrible circumstances like Yasui, but he's at least trying to work his way out of it. Winning the match means keeping his livelihood. It means not returning to that household where he upsets the family balance. Even though Rei is a mostly melancholic and mild character, losing this shogi match is something he can't afford to give up. At the end of the school year, with almost too many absences due to shogi matches, Rei barely manages to finish his second year of high school. He still tries to attend the best he can, but he acknowledges he doesn't need to because he already makes a livable earning from being a professional shogi player, thus making the education system irrelevant. Rei knows that he only comes to school because he wants to make friends, though every time he shows up, he winds up eating lunch alone on the staircase with his homeroom teacher, Hayashida, being his only friend. Rei reflects that nothing changed this year, that he was almost held back a grade, that he didn't make any friends, that he didn't join a club, that he didn't even get promoted in shogi. He remarks he was only able to move up a grade because Hayashida, being a shogi hobbyist, understood his circumstances and was able to bond with him, going out of his way as a teacher to make sure Rei met the graduation requirements. Rei bows his head to the homeroom teacher, who tells him that he didn't just not accomplish anything. Rei worked, went to school while working, cooked, did the laundry, took out the trash, competed, made money, and paid rent all by himself. Hayashida recollects that when he was 17, he dreamed of becoming something big, but never put in the effort to actually search for and achieve that goal. He went to the arcade, read manga, made friends, watched TV, and never learned to live on his own at that age. Hayashida says that Rei shouldn't tell himself he didn't accomplish anything because he did his best. It never hits you until Hayashida's speech, the stark contrast between a normal teenager growing up and Rei's childhood. The show is based around Rei's perspective, with solemn moments filled with his inner monologue, and while he does battle with his traumatic past, to compare it to a normal upbringing cements just how much effort Rei puts in to try to find his own happiness. Being alone with no one to support you is a cold, isolating feeling. Every battle you face, you're on your own. There is no power of friendship to save you, or even anyone to care about your demise. It is an absolute struggle just to motivate yourself to stand up and fight, and any regular teenager would not be able to withstand being alone, but not Rei. At a young age, his circumstances were tragic, and even though Rei could have stayed with his adoptive family for longer, he took advantage of his prodigy shogi skills and chose to throw himself out into the world at the age of a junior high student because he knew his existence was damaging the others around him. Rei never had a place to call home. The pleasant memories of his real family only exist in his mind, while the tensions in his adoptive one give him a severe sense of anxiety. Yet he still pushes himself to find genuine happiness. Even though his lifestyle is pathetic, to even be able to maintain himself at that age is a colossal achievement. And Rei, choosing not to blind himself with ignorance or complacency, ultimately became stronger because he was alone. Wait, that reminds me, I was in the middle of something before recording this. Alright, first of all, having your pawn teleport behind my king and doing an assassination attempt is not a legal move. Second of all, you can't just eat my bishop mid-match. Come on, man, it was an act of peace too. Whatever, are you still hungry? I'll go pick up some food on my way back to the food bank. Hey, it was only that one time. But no, I'm just doing some volunteer work. Volunteering, huh? Like from Yahari Ore no Seishun Love Comedy wa Machigatteiru, also known as My Teen Romantic Comedy Snafu, also known as Oregairu, is the rom-com anime that stars our relatable loner protagonist Hikigaya Hachiman. On his second year of Japanese high school, Hachiman is the definition of a loser, but don't characterize him as the gross edgelords who jork it to isekai power fantasies. Hachiman completely accepts everyone else looking down upon his loner personality, being a-okay with getting called creepy and disgusting. He suffered through bullying and rejection throughout his childhood. All his interactions with the other students were surface-level one-sided admiration, and even though he wanted to connect with the people around him, his peers pushed him to the outskirts of social circles. As a very reflective and introspective person does, Hachiman became completely cynical going into high school. Tasked with writing an essay reminiscing his high school career, he cross-examines the romantic idea that failure is the peak of youth, giving the counterexample that someone who's not made any friends would be considered a failure and a loser, coming to the conclusion that people's thoughts are filled with double standards, and those that enjoy their youth should love themselves. And not gonna lie, I kinda get it. His teacher and advisor, Shizuka Hiratsuka, as a great teacher does, notices he's having difficulties integrating himself into society, and as a reward for feeding her an interesting essay, forces Hachiman to join the service club, featuring none other than Yukino Yukinoshita. Yukino and Hachiman are two sides of the same social outcast coin. On one side, you have Hachiman, a loser creep who finds solace in being alone because he doesn't understand keeping up pretenses with his cynical gaze slicing through small talk. On the other, you have Yukino, a prideful girl with both good looks and talent, making the other girls in her grade jealous. Not caring about others' opinions, Yukino didn't hide any of her exceptional abilities to fit in with the rest of her peers, and ultimately, she decided that she'd rather be alone than assimilate herself. Instead of changing herself, Yukino aspires to change the people around her. Just by their first conversation, you can get a pretty good glimpse into their respective mindsets. Hachiman brags about his intellect and undermines the fact that he has no friends, signaling that he doesn't care about social cliques, while Yukino puts herself on a pedestal, showcasing her confidence, talking down to Hachiman. Despite seeming like a pretty standard first episode, setting the scene and introducing the main cast, this episode is very deceptive. Being able to read between the lines is absolutely mandatory in the show if you don't want to be confused at the mess that's going to happen later. But don't you worry, my dear beautiful viewer, I will hold your hand. After explaining that the purpose of the club is basically volunteer work to help other students achieve their goals, Hiratsuka-sensei forces them into a battle to see who can volunteer the most, with the loser doing whatever the winner desires. And so it begins. They sit in the club room 10 feet apart because they're not freaky, and nothing happens. Enter Yui Yagahama. She comes with the request of wanting to make cookies and be better at baking. Yui is not the greatest in this art form, making subpar sweets, and she knows she's not competent enough, citing that she doesn't have talent. Yukino's solution is to inspire her. Never give up. Keep trying to improve, and one day you'll get there. If you can't even imagine yourself getting better, you will never get better. Yukino diagnoses Yui with loser's mentality, and despite the harsh critique, Yui admires Yukino for being straight with her and saying what she has on her mind. They try baking again, and it doesn't come out great. Seeing the difficulty of trying to get Yui to improve, Hachiman proposes his own solution. Instead of trying to improve yourself and make better cookies, just try your hardest and give them to the guy you like anyways. He explains that it doesn't matter if they're not tasty, guys will splurge all over themselves if a cute kawaii anime girl simply talks to them, which, you know, he's not wrong. Yui accepts his solution, but after finishing up, Yukino has some second thoughts. She still thinks Yui should have tried her hardest to improve herself, saying that it'd be better in the long run for her. Hachiman doesn't disagree, though since he's internalized more rejection than Yukino, claims that hard work will often betray your expectations, and that just doing your best can help remedy that. So which ideology is better? Well, it's kind of up to you to decide. Even though Yui chooses Hachiman's solution here because it is the option that's less work, Yukino's motto of always improving yourself is just as appealing, building long-term skills and confidence. This might make Hachiman's idea seem lazy, but it's also important to preserve yourself to see another day. Having your expectations betrayed constantly only makes you miserable, and you might end up never trying at anything ever again. While both of these resolutions have their pros, cons, and complications, the problem they're facing right now is baking sweets for a guy you like. It's not that serious. And so, Yui Yagahama joins the club. Someday later, as Hachiman and Yui are talking during lunch together, the two service club members get a request from a guy. This is a guy. This is a dude. His name is Totsuka. As the leader of the tennis club, he wants to get better at the sport so that he can inspire the other members to do the same. The service club members take on his request and help him train until Yumiko and Hayato's group show up. Hayato is your average popular nice guy, while Yumiko is your average popular mean girl. They see that the tennis courts are being used by other students and want in. Hachiman explains that Totsuka reserved the place, but Hayato tries convincing them that it's more fun if everyone is playing. Hachiman counters that despite being popular at school, despite being the star of the soccer team, despite having a handsome 2013 animated face, Hayato is taking the tennis courts from the people who truly need it. And so, to decide who gets to use the courts, they battle it out in mixed doubles. Yui and Hachiman versus Yumiko and Hayato. The service club members get their ass beat metaphorically. And by service club members, I mean Yui, because she's the only one actually trying. After suffering an injury, she leaves the court, forcing Hachiman to finally get serious, aka grovel, and lick their shoes. As funny and anticlimactic as this is, Hachiman's monologue of taking pride in putting his social standing in the negatives to get anything accomplished is a very brief but sincere moment of his character, especially since he isn't the one actually benefiting from this tennis match. Totsuka is. And while there is no easy explanation to why he goes to such lengths to aid others, I can see where he's coming from. Even though helping people feels like an option to others, to him, it feels like an obligation. Right as Hachiman's about to get on all fours, a new challenger approaches. Yukino. She replaces Yui in the doubles and absolutely steamrolls Hayato and Yumiko, only falling short of winning the point due to her low stamina. Fatigued, she declares Hachiman will be the one to finish the job. He serves, hitting the ball high up in the air, disregarding speed or spin. Hachiman abuses the fact that their school is close to the ocean and that the breeze is strong, able to change the course of the ball. Because he usually spends his lunch outside alone, Hachiman is also familiar with the 1-2 wind direction mix-up. The ball is in Hachiman's court again, literally and metaphorically, and he asks Hayato how many kids it takes to play baseball, with Hayato instinctively replying 18. He monologues that whereas the other kids faced their problems together, supporting and arguing with each other, he stands where he is today all because he endured his challenges by himself. Hachiman serves a pop fly, a technique he's honed due to playing baseball alone. Yumiko tries to return it, almost slamming into the fences, getting saved by Hayato, which gets the crowd wild, chanting his name. Even though the service club won the match, the student body was swayed by Hayato's display. Later in the show, it's revealed that Hachiman got into an accident on his first day of high school, getting hit by a car after saving a girl's dog. He became hospitalized with a broken leg, not really caring about the incident until Komachi, his little sister, brings up the fact that Yui was the girl whose dog he saved. Suddenly, the dots start connecting for Hachiman. Yui's baking predicament on his first day of joining the club? Those cookies were meant for him. During a workplace visit, as the other students are celebrating at a restaurant, Yui invites him, saying that she'd hate to see Hachiman walk in last by himself. He tells her that he doesn't need any compensation, that she should stop being nice to him, implying she was only friendly to him out of guilt of the accident. This causes Yui to tear up, running off, but Hachiman doesn't chase after her. He accepts his despicable nature, monologuing that he hates nice girls. Girls that are nice to him get his hopes up even though he knows that that's just how they are to everyone else. Getting his expectations up, being tricked into thinking that he is special to them, Hachiman concludes that if reality is a cruel mistress, then a lie must be a nice girl, and Hachiman hates nice girls. Hachiman is a seriously memorable and interesting protagonist. Most anime tend to have naive, reckless male stars of their show, but Hachiman is pretty much the exact opposite of that. His monologue deductions hit home for an introverted loser like me. Betrayed too many times by his own expectations and the peers around him in elementary and middle school, Hachiman has become extremely self-conscious and cynical of others, using logic and reasoning to push almost everyone away from him. He uses cynicism to shield himself from repeating the same mistakes of his younger years, wanting to connect with others around him, but never being able to read their true intentions of whether they reciprocate the feeling. His unpleasant way of thinking is a method to keep himself from being fooled, actually working against him in Yui's case when she starts tearing up and running away, as she might have had genuine intentions. Pure cynicism is disgusting to watch. A person who distrusts others to the max, becoming so self-centered that only their thoughts and feelings matter in the world. However, Hachiman isn't like that. Proof? Totsuka. Yeah, sometimes it takes the best man to be the best girl, blah blah blah. I wish I was joking, but there is genuinely a connection here. Totsuka is a joke of a character, so pure and radiant that even Hachiman can't find faults in him. And this shows that Hachiman isn't the entire embodiment of a cynical attitude. In the bigger picture, as seen in the tennis court match, Hachiman is selfless enough to put down his existence just to help someone in need. And it's the accumulation of these instances in the show where he helps people that makes Hachiman a truly unique character. Somewhere within him, despite pushing everyone away, he hopes that someone will break past his guard and connect with him on a genuine level. Hachiman is at the bottom of the social ladder, and throughout the entire anime, other characters will constantly put him down, making recurring jokes about how disgusting, creepy, and gross he is. And he is very aware of this fact. What surprises me though is that no matter how much he gets beat down, at no point does he try to stand up for himself. Hachiman even feeds into this banter with intense self-deprecation, encouraging people to think lower of him. He uses his low social status as a multi-purpose advantage. It keeps others away in a superficial manner, which makes it easier to filter through who's being shallow and who isn't, and when solving problems, he gets to use the most underhanded, nasty, yet efficient tactics that anyone with a sense of pride would not think of. Hachiman isn't your average high school loser. Years of rejection, bullying, and introspection turned him into a conniving monster of logic and cynicism. And despite being a self-proclaimed loser, his willingness to help strangers attracts people to him. His solutions might be unpleasant, but they get the job done with barely any consequences. At least, for now. With Yui's feelings being hurt, she's stopped showing up to the club, so Hiratsuka-sensei tasks Hachiman and Yukino with replenishing their human resources. Yukino deduces that all they need is another third member, which they can just get by making up with Yui. She figures out Yui's birthday from the last 4 digits of her email address, and asks Hachiman to accompany her on a date but not date to shop for a present for Yui. They grab a gift and give it to her, to which Hachiman clarifies his feelings, saying he didn't save her dog to get any favors, so she doesn't need to be nice to him anymore. Yui tells him that that is a twisted way of thinking, but the situation is so complicated she doesn't know how to approach it anymore. Yukino simplifies everything down. If Hachiman had no intention of helping Yui in the first place, and Yui didn't have any thought of pitying him, then their relationship is completely normal. Season 1 of the show is mainly filled with moments that characterize the characters, especially Hachiman with his underhanded problem-solving tactics. Season 2, though, is where the drama actually kicks in. At the start of Season 2, the Service Club gets a request. Not too unusual. This guy, Tobe, wants help for asking out a girl he likes, Ebina. The Service Club and Tobe start planning events out, using the approaching school trip to Kyoto as a backdrop. Later on, though, Ebina comes to the Service Club and cryptically asks them to prevent Tobe's confession. They're part of the same friend group, and due to some recent events, she currently isn't open to a relationship and wants space for herself, making his rejection guaranteed. The rejection could make things awkward for the group and have it fall apart, and Ebina wants to prevent that. The trip comes, and the club members try setting the stage to Tobe's advantage as much as possible, giving the two opportunities to be alone together and helping Tobe shine. Once the confession day comes, it's already been sealed that Ebina will reject him, yet Tobe, unaware of this fact, presses on to declare his feelings. As he's making his confession, right as he's about to say the line, Hachiman runs up next to him and steals the words right out of his mouth. Ebina and Tobe are both shocked, but she realizes what's happening and gently declines Hachiman right in front of Tobe. Everyone watching from behind the scenes, the other Service Club members and the guys of Hayato's friend group, are all appalled by what they witnessed, with Yukino and Yui especially disliking the solution of the request. When I first watched this scene as a brain-rotted teenager, I absolutely had no clue why everyone was upset at Hachiman. But now that I've rewatched the anime as a brain-rotted adult, I finally understand everything. Hachiman perfectly solves the entire situation. Tobe wanted help to ask out Ebina. He got that. Ebina wanted to reject Tobe in a way that wouldn't make their friend group awkward. By having Hachiman be rejected and Tobe be present there for that, she got her request fulfilled too. No one got hurt, except for Hachiman, who looked totally uncool for stealing the moment, but he's used to sacrificing his social standing for these requests. So why are Yukino and Yui mad at him when he logically tied everything up neatly? Well, it all comes back to that first episode, baby. Yeah, you thought I was kidding when I said this anime is about reading between the lines, but hear me out. Revisiting the first episode, remember Yukino's aspirations? That's right, she wants to change the world. Yukino became a loner because she didn't want to hide her exceptional abilities to fit in, and this inner desire to change things for the better and not hide your true feelings is what made her upset at Hachiman. She thought he was a loner like her, who aspired for the same goal of change and becoming a better person. But this event cemented him as someone who absolutely resists change at all costs. His solution, while it did fix the surface level problem, failed to confront the underlying issue. If Ebina, Tobe, and the rest of Hayato's clique were truly friends, they wouldn't be this scared of falling apart due to a rejection. In the grand scheme of things, having your romantic feelings be declined is insignificant compared to truly caring about that person. Sure, it sucks, and it might make things a little awkward for a while, but as corny as it is, real friends take the time to understand each other. Yukino, seeing that lack of trust in the circle, wanted a better solution. Tobe getting rejected by Ebina, but not letting that stop him from maintaining his friendship with her. Instead, Hachiman upheld the status quo of pretenses. Extremely ironic, because he constantly monologues that he despises superficiality. And even though he neatly solved both requests, in Yukino's eyes, the root of the problem remained unchanged. Not only were the results subpar, but Hachiman sacrificed himself to make it happen. By now, he's built enough rapport with Yui and Yukino to call them friends, though they don't want to openly admit that. And seeing someone you care about hurt themselves to benefit others is never a good feeling. Even if he is used to it, that doesn't make it okay to let him harm his self-image and confidence. Later on, the extreme dissatisfaction to how those requests played out causes the club atmosphere to be tense. Yukino is upset at Hachiman for resolving things his way, while Hachiman thinks his methods are completely justified. Neither of them want to acknowledge the tension though. Yui tries acting like everything is normal, making small talk with Yukino, but she is also aware of how strained things are. In comes Iroha Ishiki. On the outside, she acts like a cute kawaii anime girl because, you know, She is one. Once she acknowledges you can see through her though, she'll start letting more of her less cute side out. Iroha comes with the request of wanting to lose the presidential elections. The student council ones. She's the most popular girl in her grade, which causes a lot of other girls to get jealous of her, putting her name in for running without her consent as a prank. Iroha, being popular, got enough students to back her, guaranteeing the position because no one else wants to run for president. She wants to lose the race since being student council president is a lot of responsibility, and she's already the manager of the soccer team, manipulating men harder than female Valorant players. However, backing down out of nowhere isn't really an option because that'd make her look lame. So the catch on Iroha's request is that it has to be done in a way that doesn't make her lose street cred. Hachiman immediately comes up with an answer. Have someone else make a campaign speech so miserable that no one wants to vote for her, basically using that person as a scapegoat to back out of the race. Yui asks who will make that speech, and while Hachiman doesn't exactly say it'll be him, the other service club members know he's the only one willing to execute that plan. Yukino adamantly refuses his option, citing that it's not guaranteed to work. Fueled by how the previous request turned out, she gets uncharacteristically passionate, giving multiple reasons why Hachiman's method isn't the right one, stopping midway to calm herself down. She proposes the idea of backing a different candidate instead, one that wouldn't hurt Iroha's reputation if she lost to them. But Hachiman refutes it, arguing that that person would have ran already if they wanted to run. Coming to a standstill, Yukino offers to take separate paths, and he agrees to it, not wanting to force a compromise. A couple days later, Hachiman is notified by Hiratsuka-sensei that Yukino is running for student council president herself. He confronts her about it, which shocks Yui as she got left out of that information. Yukino reiterates that she's competent and hardworking enough to take on the responsibilities of the position, and due to her high social standing, beating Iroha would not be an issue. The only problem is that because she has more duties, her involvement in the service club would be diminished. After school, as Yui and Hachiman are walking home together, Yui reveals that she's going to run in the election. She's tired of sitting back and doing nothing and wants to make a change herself. Yui acknowledges that once Yukino becomes president, it'll cost the club she's in love with, and she doesn't want to let that go. With all that determination, Yui declares she's going to beat Yukino in the elections. Confused at what he should do, Hachiman consults his little sister, Komachi. They fought in a previous episode due to Hachiman being stubborn about how the confession request turned out. Komachi intuitively knew he was bothered by something, but he refused to open up to her, pushing her away instead. Hachiman, now out of options, turns to Komachi for advice. She tells him that she likes both Yui and Yukino, and gives him the goal of stopping the dissolution of the service club. And Hachiman, tasked with carrying out his doting little sister's wish, finally acts. Instead of giving a lousy campaign speech and pinning the blame on a scapegoat, he devises a new plan where he convinces Iroha to take on the duties of president, saying she can use it to her advantage when she wants to avoid work or manipulate men. He then surveys the student body who they think should become student council president, using their signatures to get put on a social media account dedicated to that candidate. But to make Iroha become president, Hachiman pulls out the signature forbidden F12 Inspect Element Tech and changes the social media account to back Iroha instead, basically lying that she got these people to vote for her. And so Hachiman Hikigaya, again, elaborately solved everyone's problems. Iroha, while she initially didn't want to become president, was convinced to take up the position, and the service club didn't have to get disbanded, fulfilling Yui, Yukino, and Komachi's wishes. He tells Yui and Yukino that they don't need to run anymore. Both girls know he somehow used his signature underhanded tactics to get this result, but Yui, knowing he did it to protect the club, chooses to turn a blind eye, feeling relief instead. Yukino, however, is disappointed in him, thinking he'd understand why she ran for student council president. Iroha gets elected, and while helping move the equipment, Hachiman briefly talks with the current president, Shido Meguri. She tells him about her secret hope of having Yukino succeed her in the student council, with Yui as vice president and Hachiman as general affairs. Every now and then, the soon-to-be alumnus would come to the room and revisit their high school memories. The last bit from Shido Meguri makes you question Hachiman's perceptions and why he couldn't just do this much simpler and cleaner solution instead of his entire convoluted mess, and it really shows how warped Hachiman's perspective is. Again, he logically fixed everything in a neat fashion. Iroha was convinced to become president, and he kept the service club from disbanding. However, this doesn't solve the underlying wishes of the people most important to him, Yui and Yukino. Yui's wish was to preserve the club, but don't take that at face value. She doesn't actually like the service club itself. She likes spending time with Hachiman and Yukino, and it is the club that is the medium through which she does that. Hachiman maintained the club, sure, but he didn't fix the tension that was in the air from the confession request. The atmosphere is even more awkward now between the three of them because he made things worse with this request, and the fact that he didn't confront and mend these damaged ties means that he really didn't fulfill Yui's wish. Hachiman also screwed up Yukino's plans. She wanted to improve herself as a person, taking on the responsibility of student council president, while also achieving that ideal future of turning the service club into basically the student council. But in the end, she was forced to yield to Hachiman's solution. Hachiman's way of problem solving heavily avoids the root cause, as foreshadowed in the first episode. Want to bake cookies but suck at it? Instead of practicing and getting better, just try your hardest and give them to the guy you like anyways. Feeling alone and getting bullied? Instead of actually resolving things and making friends, destroy the bully's relationships by having them turn on each other. Some girl is being an attention-seeking maniac? Instead of trying to push her to be a better person, use your despicable nature to compare yourself to her so she shuts the hell up. These perfectly logical yet imperfect solutions have always had their consequences, but up until now, they've never hit Hachiman where it hurts, the people he cares about. Previously, he's never had friends to think ahead of how his warped solutions would impact the people around him. Hachiman is used to being treated like trash and treating himself like trash, so he can handle the consequences of his own actions perfectly fine. But now that his world involves more than just himself, he can't contain all these side effects. With Hachiman rigging the election, the tension in the clubroom is worse than before, but that doesn't stop Iroha from coming in again and making a second request. Another high school wants to collaborate to put on a Christmas event, and now that she's student council president, she needs help handling it, coming to the service club for aid. The other members want to try and help out, though Hachiman, feeling responsible for the results of his actions, wanting to not get the others involved, pushes Iroha out the clubroom and secretly tells her that he'll personally handle it. Hachiman goes to the meeting, and it's absolutely terrible. The kids from the other high school are far from pragmatic, throwing around big words that seem brainstorming and innovative-like, but in actuality give no sense of direction. With time especially being a limiting factor, decision-making needs to be decisive, otherwise the event will be an embarrassment to both high schools. Hachiman steers the meeting towards working with the constraints they have, but it's met with resistance from the opposing student council, shutting him down. He tries switching up the strategy, speaking with their own over-the-top semantics to try to get his idea across. This only has the opposite intended effect though, and they wind up becoming even more abstract with their planning instead. The meeting ends with no luck, as Hachiman is unable to break the atmosphere. Walking home from a meeting, Hachiman runs into his homeroom teacher, Hiratsuka-sensei. She kidnaps him, taking him in her car when, honestly, it should have been me, and they stop at the road adjacent to the ocean. She throws him a can of coffee, smokes a cigarette, and goddamn, it should have been me. Hiratsuka-sensei asks him how the meetings are going, to which Hachiman honestly tells her how it is. They lack time, and both student council presidents don't want to take responsibility for failure, causing their planning to be super vague. Hiratsuka-sensei acknowledges his ability to tell what people are thinking, but she questions his ability to empathize with others. She gives him the advice that people's thoughts don't always mirror how they feel, which is how the three service club members can jump to the wrong conclusions. Hiratsuka-sensei says that the service clubs and the high school collaboration meetings problems boil down to the same cause: the human heart. Hachiman can't find a methodical way to understand that though, so the teacher tells him that since he's really good at thinking, come up with every possible solution and eliminate them one by one. The last one will be your answer. She calls this final answer the one he can't calculate: human emotion. Hiratsuka-sensei talks about the election and the fact that Hachiman tried solving the meetings by himself instead of doing it with the service club. He did it to not hurt Yukinoshita, but never questioned why he didn't want to hurt her. Hiratsuka-sensei tells him he did it because he cares about her. Yet people in general hurt each other by simply existing. However, if you don't care about someone, you won't notice that you're causing pain to them because that's what holding people dear means. It's knowing and caring that you will hurt someone, but being prepared to take that risk anyways. With one final piece of advice, she tells him that the present isn't everything, but there are things you can only do now. Hiratsuka-sensei encourages Hachiman to struggle, and if he isn't struggling, then what he's doing isn't genuine. There's a lot of jokes at Hiratsuka-sensei's expense about how she isn't married at her age. I am available. I'm just putting that out there. Anyways, this half an episode of lecturing is absolute gold. If you didn't pick up on it already, the high school collaboration event mimics the atmosphere in the service club room. No one wants to confront the real problem, and they're all stuck in a deadlock, fearing failure, or in the club's case, hurting someone else. Hachiman's way of problem solving with the people he cares about avoids hurting them, as seen with the election rigging and him taking up Iroha's collab request by himself. He puts his friends in a weird bubble where they're not allowed to do or touch anything because he fears they might suffer, taking up everyone's problems by himself. And Hiratsuka-sensei's advice of being prepared to hurt his friends is a daunting yet authentic solution that Hachiman needed to hear. Companionship in anime is usually portrayed as wanting to protect the people around you, but if you always come to the rescue to your friends, they wind up either becoming weak or your weakness. Oftentimes in life, the most painful lessons are the ones people grow from the most, and though it makes sense to not want to see the people you care about suffer, sometimes it's for their and your own good. I love whenever Hiratsuka-sensei appears, and it's not just because she wears a suit. Not only is she practically the only character in the show that treats Hachiman with care while everyone else looks down on him, but every time she's on screen, she gives warm, reassuring advice for an overcalculating, loser, introspective high schooler boy. A character that I immensely relate to. For an unmarried, tomboyish teacher, her words resonate to a person who thinks too much about life. After a bunch of thinking, Hachiman shows up to the service club and sits down directly in front of Yui and Yukino, different from his usual spot, which is across the table. He explains to them the Christmas event situation and how it's going terrible, and he needs your help, so make sure to leave the 16 digits of your mother's credit card in the comments down below. Hachiman acknowledges everything has been his fault all along, and Yukino runs with it to the extreme, feeling he should take responsibility for his own actions and not rope anyone else in. As Hachiman gets up to leave, Yui protests, saying she and Yukino are just as responsible for letting him solve everything by himself. Hachiman understands that sometimes your intentions can't get through to people even if you try your hardest. To think you can perfectly verbalize your emotions and get the listener to understand is conceited, both on part of the speaker and the listener. In spite of all this, he knows that trying to communicate your feelings is better than never trying at all. He doesn't want empty, self-indulgent relationships. Hachiman wants something genuine. Yui tears up, happy that he's finally being open, while Yukino looks disturbed. She doesn't understand, running out of the room with Hachiman and Yui chasing her to the walkway. Yukino asks what he meant by genuine, and Yui, even though she doesn't get it either, is willing to go through the effort to try to comprehend it. She cries that she hates the way things are, and the two girls hug it out as Hachiman faces away from them towards the sunset. Finally, Yukino accepts his request. The service club goes to a meeting to observe the situation, and just as Hachiman says, it's horrible. The next meeting, he and Yukino actually challenge the other high school student council, but in like the really awkward way where they're projecting their feelings of what happened during that entire previous genuine speech. And I get it, you guys went through some tough times, but you know, save it for the club room, please. The other student council gets upset, but in the end, they give in, and the event becomes a success. That about wraps it up for season 2. For the next and final season, I'm going to be cutting down most of the romance since it's not relevant to what I want to talk about in this video, which might make the show seem really dry, but I'd rather respect your time than make this video 20 hours longer than it already is. Bear with me for a bit. Iroha, my favorite high school girl in the show, but not the best girl because that belongs to Hiratsuka-sensei, comes to the service club with another request of wanting to throw a prom for the graduation party. Yukino decides to take up her request, at the same time asking Yui and Hachiman to only watch over her as she handles it alone, because she wants to become more competent. They oblige, but later on, Iroha personally asks Hachiman to help out with some work, wanting him to be in the promotional video for prom. Unable to say no to his adorable underclassman, he helps out but warns her not to rely on Yukino too much, since she tends to overexert herself. Following the posting of that promotional video, the parent-teacher organization, represented by Yukino's mom, finds trouble with the idea of hosting a prom as a graduation party, instead wanting their students to stick with their traditional party that they've done in the previous years. The school itself doesn't mind and actually wants to promote autonomy from the student body, but if enough parents bug the higher-ups, they'll be forced to take action. Right now, the planning is in a deadlock position where the PTO doesn't have enough sway to fully cancel the event, but if Yukino and Iroha keep going with the prom, they could make matters worse. With the things dire, Hachiman really wants to get involved with Yukino to make the event a success, yet Yukino herself pushes him back, reasoning that if she can't overcome this, she'll never be able to improve. On the walk home with Yui, he sees an urgent text from Iroha on Yui's phone, saying that the prom has some serious allegations against it and will be getting cancelled. He calls Hiratsuka-sensei to get the details of what's going on, his consciousness finally realizing his feelings of wanting to save Yukino. Despite Yukino telling him she doesn't want any help with the project, Hachiman, from the bottom of his heart, wants to assist her. Yui, seeing Hachiman make such a bold decision, but not for her, starts tearing up. He asks if she wants to be walked home, but she declines, pushing him to rush over to Yukino. He starts walking for a bit, turning back, only to see an empty sidewalk behind him with no Yui. She quickly ran to hide her tears from him, knowing that if she started crying, he wouldn't have left her. Yui was actually the inspiration for this video, but then I realized I had to cover this entire anime just to have like a 5-minute segment of analyzing her character, and then realized that was way too long-winded and no one has the attention span for that, so I scrapped it. I think a lot of people misunderstand Yui here and think that she's such a nice person for sacrificing herself to build Hachiman's relationship with Yukino. However, this is a surface-level look at her character. Throughout the many seasons, you are often reminded that she is greedy, which is an odd adjective to describe a kawaii anime high school girl, but it's in the actual romance where you get to see that. You see, Yui and Yukino have the same wish. They want to have a relationship with Hachiman while also maintaining each other's friendships, though having both at once is impossible. Relationships increase intimacy, so the girl who doesn't get to be at Hachiman's side will lose out on that closeness, something they both want. Though Yui and Yukino can still maintain their friendship after confessing to Hachiman, it'll be practically impossible to not hurt the rejected girl because of lingering feelings, especially when you are constantly reminded that you were not chosen. This is where Yukino differs from Yui. They both know they have the same wish, but Yukino is willing to give up her feelings for Hachiman to let Yui take him as well as continue being friends. It would have worked out if not for Yui running away in this specific scene, letting Hachiman save Yukino, which logically doesn't make any sense. Why didn't she just stick with Yukino's plan? Yui's monologuing doesn't exactly give a good concrete answer other than that it was hard for her to, so it's mostly up to how you interpret her character. To me, Yui, knowing that she has the chance to take Hachiman from Yukino, crying in front of him would have been a completely selfish thing to do, fitting for her character, yet she wanted to appear like the nice girl to Hachiman. If she cried to him, asking him not to help Yukino and stay with her instead, the image of that nice girl Yui would have been ruined. Something that her actions are built upon. I really like Yui's character here. Not love, she's not there up on the tier list, but she's pretty high. Yui is an oddly, extremely complex character. She's someone teetering between the shallow and genuine worlds, friends with both Hachiman and Yumiko's group. Yui understands that in order to find something genuine like Hachiman and Yukino, she needs to dig deep and actually commit, but she's scared of doing so, because that much effort requires a sacrifice she's not willing to make. Even though Yui can mentally comprehend that something has to be be done. Emotionally, she doesn't want to give anything up, and so does everything she can to appear like she's making an effort. When push comes to shove though, she will choose to back out of the situation. As long as you consider all these feelings, I personally don't think there's a right or wrong way to view her character. Yui doesn't necessarily have bad intentions. She can be nice, not nice, greedy, selfless, strong, delicate, whatever. But in the end, her self-contradictions caught up to her. Hachiman is still adamant about wanting to help Yukino, and Yukino is still adamant about not wanting help from him. So he comes to the conclusion that they should make out, and by make out I mean make his own prom event to compete with Yukino's. His event is supposed to look like the uglier of the two, so the PTO will feel like it might as well take the better option, aka Yukino's prom, to mitigate damage. Hachiman uses his expertise in designing things that are designed to fail. You know, all of the previous solutions to the service club requests. He gets his friends to help him create the event, bringing the attention of Yukino's mother, the representative of the PTO. She sees right through this plan though, and Hachiman, all out of options, realizes he could just use the mom to persuade the PTO. What could he possibly use to do that? Remember that time he saved Yui's dog and got hit by a car? Yukinoshita family car. Yukino's mother, not wanting to dishonor the family reputation, is convinced to go with Hachiman's plan. Yukino's prom becomes an absolute success, but Hachiman throws in a kicker. He revives his failed prom event, getting Yukino to help plan it and ultimately becoming even more involved with him. He's terrified of losing contact with her and couldn't think of an excuse to interact. Hachiman knows both of them are bad at maintaining shallow relationships, but in order for you to bond with someone, you need to start somewhere. He doesn't want to drift apart from her. Hachiman, in a very roundabout fashion, confesses his feelings for Yukino, wanting the responsibility of distorting her life. He wants to continue being involved with her, not because of something self-gratifying like obligation or pride, but because he genuinely wants to help her with her goals. And so, Hachiman and Yukino finally cement their relationship. As much as I think the show brings up very thoughtful subjects, I refuse to believe Japanese high schoolers carry this much emotional maturity while at the same time speak so cryptically that I have to literally stop time to understand what they're saying, like the first archaeologist to find Egyptian hieroglyphics. Even worse, they are somehow part of the same hive mind, able to all read each other's thoughts, but are cursed by the wizard of storytelling to only verbalize their true intentions in an obscenely vague and symbolic manner. I get that it's supposed to mimic real life and have you read between the lines, but real life conversations are not like this, dog. However, what I will absolutely compliment Oregairu on is the consistency of Hachiman's character. Throughout season 1, he constantly repeats the motto that changing yourself doesn't necessarily mean becoming a better person. That if the world turns its back on you, then you turn your back on the world. And I actually agree with this statement somewhat. Change is usually seen as a positive development in the majority of stories, but because real life situations are much more random and nuanced, it's hard to determine if you're actually growing or devolving. But what makes Hachiman special is that with this motto, he actively denies his first few opportunities to change. It actually hinders him from seeing the better solutions available. What makes Hachiman even more special is that once the side effects of his methods start affecting him, he figures out a solution that doesn't compromise his character. And it's this simple trait that I love the most about him. Hachiman doesn't rewrite his entire personality to become happy-go-lucky or worse, a normie. He uses his old mindset to find an even deeper solution, bending his extreme pragmatism to fit within the constraints of the situation, instead of recklessly doing what logically fit. In a way, Hachiman upheld his slogan of not changing yourself, as he doubles down into his overcalculating nature, the trait deemed as his biggest flaw. When finally realizing his own answers, Hachiman doesn't discard his previous ones. He uses his weaknesses to challenge himself, turning them into strengths. Normal, sane people don't interact with the world the same as introverts clouded by self-deprecation and cynicism, which is a very obvious fact. But because this dichotomy exists, the advice I've seen for a lot of overbearing cynicism is to just simply open yourself up to the world. As if 1, I have sigma levels of methodical control over my emotions and can let my guard down without a massive limestone cube's worth of anxiety dropping into my skull, and 2, the trauma that caused me to become misanthropic in the first place never happened. While it may not be offensive to some, as they might be angels who are more understanding, I absolutely despise people who undermine my emotions because I know more than anyone that I am not solely built on logic. Hachiman was bullied. He was a social outcast, and much of his unpleasant nature actually came from his own cringy moments in middle school. Throughout the first season, these scenes are interjected between his monologues and are often there to make light of the trauma. But social alienation affects everyone, especially inexperienced kids, in an unpredictable manner. What's even more significant is that Hachiman, at the end of the day, is a made-up character. In real life, being a victim of bullying is terrifying. To tell these people who have been hurt by humanity to accept humanity back into their hearts grossly undermines what they've been through. Even if it is the right result with good intentions, telling others to simply stop being so cynical is not the right path to get there. People often think that there's only one way to achieve a result, but if you're creative and smart enough, life features many different routes to the same outcome. Hachiman's way of opening up to people wasn't him lowering his guard. It was using his cynicism to judge the others around him as well as himself to determine if what they had was meaningful. Hachiman's story is a loner, sick of pretenses and shallow interactions, coming to find a true reason within himself, not based on fluffy ideals or morals, to figure out why he wanted to connect with the people around him. Oregairu, in its second and third seasons, constantly ask the question of what it means to be authentic. There is a great debate between what is genuine and what isn't between Hayato, the super mega popular guy, and Hachiman. The show pits Hachiman's friend group against Hayato's, one who rejects everything to find the meaning of authenticity, and the other who accepts everything to be real. To Hayato, everything he experiences feels genuine to him, and even though you can point out all the inconsistencies in his friend group, especially that entire fiasco where Hachiman had to cover for Tobe to avoid getting rejected and making the clique awkward, you can't exactly force Hayato to feel the emptiness that Hachiman feels. This just goes to show how hard it really is to get people to understand each other's emotions. Constantly throughout the anime, Hachiman's reasons and methods for solving problems are questioned. When he rigged the student council presidential election, he did it to maintain the club, but as I previously mentioned, that reason wasn't good enough. When he tried solving the high school collaboration alone, he did it to take responsibility for rigging the election, and again, that wasn't good enough. People often speak of morals and personal interest to give reasoning to their actions, but like Hachiman, these fundamentals can easily mislead your motivations when in reality, something much deeper was driving you all along. Hachiman's world is built on cynicism and logic, and even though those two methods can help him read the motivations of the people around him, it doesn't help understand his own feelings. Cynicism destroys ethics like responsibility and obligation because, logically speaking, it's not in your self-interest to take the burden of someone else. Yet despite this mindset, Hachiman in his time in the service club has helped out way more students than his self-image of a misanthropic loner loser would. These self-contradicting moments where he emotionally wants to do the right thing but mentally jumps to the imperfect conclusion shows the difficulty in being able to understand yourself, and it's Hiratsuka sensei's advice of eliminating every possible answer to find where your true emotions lie that hits home the most. Everyone has emotions. Unless you're an AI watching this, then hello Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg. But this also means that because no one is perfectly mentally in tune with how they feel all the time, everyone will naturally jump to imperfect conclusions. This is a completely natural and human thing to do. There's nothing wrong with this. The real genuineness comes from acknowledging that your perceptions might not match up with your emotions. It is truly being honest with yourself, seeking that perfect alignment between your thoughts and your feelings. If you're someone who's never felt this underlying feeling of emptiness before, then this video is not for you. In a nice way, honestly. I know my tone is super condescending in a lot of these videos, but I, for real, no cap, no piss, no cum, think it must be nice to embrace life like that. It's not my belief to brainwash everyone into believing the same things as me, me, especially because we're talking about feelings and emotions here, which, I can't experience for you and then put in my objective emotion analyzer machine 3000 and then say, yes, you are feeling insecure because you did not PayPal me $50,000. I know emotions are a very self-indulgent and preachy thing to discuss. The way I perceive the world can be vastly different from the way everyone else sees it. And while making this video, there is a severe doubt within me that no one will understand what the hell I am saying, causing me to look like a complete delusional maniac. However, what I can say is that I am a schizophrenic, self-conscious, over-calculating YouTuber, and I mainly make these videos not for the people who will never try to understand this feeling, but for those who earnestly want to know what it feels like or have felt the same things that I have felt. If you couldn't already tell by the YouTube channel, I had periods in my life where I didn't have many friends. But wait just a second, I don't want you to think of me as the over-romanticized underdog backstory of the kid sitting alone at the lunch table, because I absolutely was not that. Fortunately, I was never bullied, but my friend group, if I had one at the time, was very small. More often than not, especially going into junior high and high school, I was at the outskirts of social circles. People barely knew I existed, and I was completely okay with that. I didn't push myself to make a lot of friends since, like Hachiman, my cynicism prevented me from living in the moment. My high school was a very competitive one, and my classmates were not only doing their best to build friendships, but also studying relentlessly to maintain their grades and ranking on top of doing clubs and after-school activities. All my peers seemed to have no problem pursuing what they wanted. Yet even though I knew I was smart enough and hardworking enough, I could never push myself to do what they did. My biggest reason being I never saw the point in all of it. I mean, getting into an Ivy League college is an amazing achievement, but I didn't feel much passion about dedicating my life to a certain academic subject. To me, there was no difference in becoming a musician, doctor, accountant, lawyer, teacher, or CEO, and even less of a difference between going to an Ivy League school and a public university. If all I needed was to make above a certain income to survive in the world, then I might as well choose the path of least resistance. I thought to myself, is this really everything life has to offer? Get good grades, get into a good school, work a stable paying job, build a family, and die old? Looking back at my high school career, I was desperately struggling, trying to fit myself in other people's ideals, trying to be like my classmates and pursue the same things they were chasing, trying to fight my apathetic feelings towards life. Compared to my mental state, everyone around me seemed to be living their life to the fullest, so I reasonably thought that I must be wrong somehow. I wanted a piece of that blissfulness they were enjoying, but I never attained it. For years, I let this solemn emotion fester within me, doing my best to hide it from others as well as myself. Being alone sucks. However, it wasn't compassion or friendship that I wanted, and somehow my past self subconsciously understood this. It's why I chose not to make many friends. I respect my previous decisions to stay alone, to not distract myself from the hole in my existence or use other people's reasons to reassure my doubts. In order to fill the emptiness I've been staring into for the longest time, I had to dig deep and question everything I was doing. And finally, after all this time, I'm slowly starting to realize my own answer. For the first time, I have reconciled with this feeling that has been eating at me for years, and I am thankful, with courage and coincidence, that I carved my way through my own warped world. By rising and struggling alone, with no one else to solve my problems but me, I have obtained a greater sense of purpose in my life. Anyways, that's about it for this video. Thanks for your attention span.